Sometimes it takes a fall to hear what life has been screaming all along. The hoofbeats thundered against the red earth like a warning. Dust spiraled into the copper sky as Don Tomas Orozco tightened his grip on the reins. The stallion beneath him, Cruzado, snorted and jerked nervously. Something in the wind was wrong. He felt it in his bones. He was riding the far perimeter of Rancho del Silencio, the oldest stretch of land near the canyon cliffs, where vultures circled and fences went to die. It was land that hadn't seen repair in seasons, the kind his father would have cursed him for ignoring. But Don Tomas had felt restless that morning, the kind of restlessness that creeps into the chest when memories start to stir. Then it happened. From the brush, something moved fast and low, a jackrabbit. Cruzado reared with a screech, his hooves slicing the air. Don Tomas tried to steady him, but the beast twisted violently. His boot slipped from the stirrup. The world spun, then silence. He hit the ground hard, shoulder first. Pain exploded in his ribs. The breath punched out of him. For a second, he couldn't move. Cruzado galloped off without looking back. Don Tomas lay in the dust, winded, staring up at the trembling limbs of a mesquite tree overhead. He blinked against the sun. Somewhere in the distance, he heard shouting. "Don Tomas el Patron's down!" Footsteps, running, closer. He turned his head slightly, but didn't speak, and that's when he heard it. Do you think he heard? How could he? He hit the ground like a sack of maize. Two ranch hands knelt beside him. One of them, Manuel, he thought, checked his pulse. Still breathing. Should we move him? Slowly. We don't want to break him worse. Don Tomas kept still, eyes closed, heart thudding. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was the strange pull of that voice he hadn't recognized before. You think he knows about the boy? How could he? Nobody told him. Not even Doña Marta. Well, he damn well should know. The boy's right under his nose. The other muttered, right in the stables, feeding his horses. Don Tomas's breath caught. His mind flashed with images, the young man with the guarded eyes, dark hair, always quiet. Iker. Was that who they meant? They lifted him carefully. Each movement shot pain through his ribs. He gritted his teeth but kept quiet. Right under his nose. The thought rang louder than the pain. The main house was cool and shadowed the adobe walls, breathing in the late afternoon light. They placed him on his bed. Doña Marta arrived quickly, wiping her hands on her apron, her face drawn tight with worry. What happened? Horse threw him. Looks like the shoulder took most of it. She touched his forehead. No fever. Pulse steady. Let him rest. They left. The door closed. He opened his eyes. The room was still. The ceiling fan creaked. Outside, doves cooed under the eaves. But inside his chest, the air felt heavy. He saw Iker that morning brushing Cruzado, quiet as ever. The boy barely looked up when he passed. Just a nod, nothing more. Don Tomas hadn't paid him any mind. But now every look, every gesture came flooding back. The eyes, the jawline, the silence. He sat up slowly, groaning. His shoulder ached, but he didn't care. What he'd heard was more dangerous than any fall. If it was true, if the boy was who they hinted at, then he had failed someone long ago, without even knowing. Later that evening, he stayed in bed while the hacienda moved on without him. Doña Marta brought soup and pain salve. She sat for a while but said little. She never did. Her silence had always seemed like respect. Now it felt like it hid something. After she left, Lucia entered quietly, carrying fresh towels. She was followed by Anita, who brought in a pitcher of cool water. Anita, the bright one. always smiling. But today her eyes lingered too long. "He looks tired," Lucia whispered. "He looks like Iker when he's angry," Anita replied, setting the pitcher down. Lucia laughed nervously. "Don't say things like that." But Anita kept staring. "I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying they have the same eyes." The same eyes. He turned his head slowly on the pillow, letting those words settle. He didn't sleep much that night. His mind kept going back to Yunwen, the girl with wild hair and fire in her voice. The only one who ever made him promise things he was too young to keep. She had told him, "Don't come back without purpose. Don't come back if all you have is charm." He had left with nothing, dreaming of returning with everything. But maybe he had returned too late. By morning, the sky outside was blue and cruelly cheerful. The ranch hands whispered outside his window. Cruzado had been found grazing near the river. Don Tomas sat up and stared out the window. He could see the stables, and in the distance a young man leading a mare across the paddock. Lean frame, slow gait, head down. The sun caught the side of his face. Iker, right under his nose. He gripped the edge of the windowsill. He didn't know what the boy had been told. Didn't know what secrets Doña Marta had kept. But he knew this much: if Iker was his son, and no one had ever told either of them, the silence between them wasn't just quiet. It was betrayal. That day Don Tomas did not call for Doña Marta. He did not demand answers. Instead, he watched. He watched the boy who might be his moving with a kind of sadness he recognized. And for the first time in decades, Don Tomas felt fear. Not of death, but of being too late. The early sun rose hard and gold over Rancho del Silencio, casting long shadows across the dry paddocks. Don Tomas Orozco sat at the window, coffee untouched in his hand, shoulder still sore from the fall. But pain wasn't what kept him still. It was the boy walking toward the stables with a rope over his shoulder, and the weight of 1,000 silences in his steps. Iker. Don Tomas watched him, the way a man might watch a fire burning across the field, not with fear, but with the quiet certainty that if he didn't act, it might swallow everything. He should have called Doña Marta. He should have demanded the truth from someone. But instead, he watched. Every movement of that boy felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. There was a rhythm to him, a quiet endurance. That same stubborn stillness that had once lived in Tomas himself when he was young, wild, and clawing his way through poverty with pride as his only shield. By mid-morning, Tomas finally dressed and limped out to the porch. Lucia was sweeping the clay tiles and Anita was stringing laundry on the wire between 2 cedar posts. They both stopped when they saw him. "Señor, you should still be resting," Lucia said, lowering her broom. "I've rested enough for a man who barely hit his head," Tomas replied with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Anita offered a hesitant smile. "The shoulder, though. You landed hard." Tomas nodded. "I did." He looked out toward the barn. "Iker's been out there since before sunrise," Anita said softly, sensing his attention. "Didn't say much. Just got to work like always." Tomas squinted. "You know him well," she shrugged. "Not really. He doesn't talk much. Doesn't look people in the eye." Lucia chimed in, "But he works like the devil's chasing him." Tomas looked at Anita again. Her hands were still on the clothespin, but her gaze was far off. "What are you thinking, Niña?" he asked. She blinked and smiled shyly. "It's probably nothing. Just something silly." "Say it." Anita hesitated, then said the words that tightened something in Tomas's chest. "You look at him like a stranger, but his eyes speak your language. Lucia gasped, half joking. Anita. But Anita just shrugged. I'm just saying. The eyes. The way he stands. He looks like... She stopped herself, but Tomas already knew what she was going to say. Like me. He turned and walked toward the barn. The sun was hot, the air thick with the scent of horses and sweat. Inside, the dim light filtered through cracks in the old wooden beams. Iker was hauling a bale of hay mussels flexed under a worn cotton shirt. He moved with precision, quiet as always. Tomas didn't speak. He leaned against the barn door and just watched. Eventually, Iker turned and saw him. He froze. "Señor," he said with a nod, voice flat. "How's the mare?" Tomas asked. "Stubborn. She gets that from the stallion. He wasn't always like that, but I suppose we all change." Iker said nothing. Tomas pushed off the doorframe and stepped inside. "You always this quiet? Or is it just around me?" Iker paused, tossed the empty hay rope aside, then met his eyes. "Silence is easier." Tomas folded his arms. "Easier than what Than's saying something I can't take back." That answer struck deeper than Tomas expected. He nodded slowly. "Fair." They stood there in the quiet, the only sounds the shifting hooves of a horse and the hum of cicadas just waking up. Tomas glanced around. "I remember when I used to muck these stalls myself, when I was your age." Iker didn't look impressed. "Before you had money, before I had anything. Dirt poor, hungry most nights. Pride kept me going." Iker leaned against the stall gate. "Pride's heavy. Sometimes it breaks more than it builds." Tomas studied him. There was bitterness in the boy, yes, but more than that, there was depth and pain. The kind that doesn't come from just being poor. The kind that comes from being abandoned. "Do you ever think about your father?" he asked, the words surprising even himself. Iker flinched slightly but covered it fast. "Not much use in it." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't change the fact he wasn't there." Tomas nodded, biting the inside of his cheek. "You think he didn't care? I think he made a choice." "What choice? To leave? Or maybe to forget?" Silence settled between them like a dust storm. Iker turned away and picked up another bale. Tomas stepped closer. What if he didn't know? Iker slammed the bale down harder than he needed to. He knew. Tomas blinked. "How?" "Because my mother said so." There it was. The wall. Thick and old and not easily scaled. "Doña Marta," Tomas said quietly. "She's known you since you were small, hasn't she?" Iker didn't answer. "She used to know your mother too." He saw the boy's shoulders tense. A confirmation. Tomas's heart pounded, but he backed off. Not yet. Not here. The truth couldn't be thrown like a lasso. It had to be unraveled slowly. "All right," he said softly. "I'll leave you to your work." He turned and walked away, leaving Iker alone with the hay and the truth they were both afraid to name. Back in the house, Tomas poured himself a drink and stood at the window again. Iker was now washing down the feeding trough, focused, precise. Doña Marta walked in behind him without knocking. "You followed him," she said plainly. Tomas didn't answer. "You're not subtle. He's not blind." She stepped beside him. "What are you going to do?" He stared out at the boy. "I'm going to listen." That night, Tomas couldn't sleep. Memories of Yunuen returned with painful clarity. Her voice, her eyes, the last words she ever said to him. If Iker was hers, He was his too, and there was only one person who knew the whole truth. Padre Eusebio, the priest who had buried Yunuen, and with her all the answers. It was time to dig them up. The chapel sat quiet at the edge of the ranch, perched on a gentle rise like it had been watching the land for centuries. Weathered stone, a cracked bell, and the faint scent of cedar and beeswax even before you stepped through the heavy doors. Don Tomas had not been inside in years. He stood at the doorway for a long time before finally pushing it open. The hinges creaked like they remembered him. Inside, Padre Eusebio was tending to the altar, his movements slow but sure, hands trembling only slightly as he lit a new candle. The priest looked up as Tomas entered. "Well," he said, smiling faintly, "I'll be damned." Tomas raised an eyebrow. "You're the one man who shouldn't say that." Eusebio chuckled. "If I didn't let out a little blasphemy once in a while, I'd forget I was human." Tomas nodded and removed his hat. They stood in silence for a moment. The candlelight flickered against the old stone walls, casting shadows that felt older than either of them. "I didn't come to pray," Tomas said. "I didn't think you did." Tomas glanced at the cross, then back at the priest. "I came to ask you something." Eusebio motioned toward a bench near the front pew. "Ask it sitting down. You look like a man carrying more than you admit." Tomas lowered himself slowly, shoulders still stiff. He stared at his hands for a while before speaking. "It's about Yunuen." Eusebio's smile faded. He sat beside him, resting his hands on his knees. "What about her? You were there. You buried her." "I did." "She ever tell you who the father was?" Eusebio was quiet. He didn't turn to look at Tomas. "No. But I always had my suspicions." Tomas breathed deep. "She never said my name, no," Eusebio said softly. "But she never had to." Tomas looked at him sharply. "You never forget the woman who taught you how to love and how to lose," the priest continued. "And I know what she meant to you, Tomas. I saw the way you looked at her back then, and I saw the way you didn't come back." Tomas bowed his head. "I was trying to build a life," he muttered, "something worthy of her. And in the end, I was too late." Eusebio finally looked at him. "She died with dignity. But it wasn't easy. She had no one. Her family had turned their backs. That boy, Iker, he was all she had." Tomas swallowed hard. "She never told him about me. She told him his father went away, that he had dreams bigger than the town. But she didn't tell him your name. Maybe she didn't want him to hate you. Maybe she wanted to protect what little good she still believed in." Tomas leaned back against the wood. "I heard something 2 days ago, after I fell from my horse. Voices I wasn't meant to hear. They said the boy, he's mine." Eusebio nodded slowly. "He is." The words landed like a stone in Tomas's chest. Simple, solid, unmoving. "I never even knew," he whispered. "And now you do." Tomas rubbed his hands together. "He hates his father," he said. "Thinks he left them both. Thinks he chose a fortune over a family." "And what do you think?" Eusebio asked. "I think I wasn't there. And maybe that's enough reason to hate me." Eusebio stood, slowly walked to the altar, and lit another candle. "She never stopped loving you," he said without turning. "Even when she knew you wouldn't make it back in time. Even when the fever came after childbirth. She held that boy in her arms and said your name under her breath like a prayer she didn't expect to be answered." Tomas closed his eyes. "Iker doesn't know any of that." "Then tell him." "He won't believe me." "Maybe not. but he deserves to know. Not for you, for her. Tomas opened his eyes and stared at the flame flickering on the altar. Do you still have her letters? Eusebio nodded. Doña Marta has them now. She kept them safe. Said one day the boy should know the truth. Tomas stood his legs unsteady. I think that day's coming. Eusebio turned to him. You need to be careful. Truth is like a wild horse. It doesn't come when you call it, and it doesn't forgive bad hands. Tomas gave a tired smile. I'll approach slowly. Back at the hacienda, Tomas went straight to the kitchen. Doña Marta was kneading dough, her forearms dusted in flour, her eyes narrowing when she saw him walk in. You should be resting, she said without looking up. Not tired, he said. Not today. She rolled the dough harder. I need the letters, he said. Her hands froze. Which letters? You know which ones. She looked up, her face lined with time and stories she had never told. You're going to tell him I have to. She washed her hands and dried them on a cloth before walking to the pantry. From behind an old crate, she pulled a tin box and brought it to the table. She opened it, revealing several folded pieces of paper, some brittle with age. Each one in Yunwen's delicate script. I was going to wait until he was ready, she said. Tomas stared at the letters like they might burn him. I think I'm the one who wasn't ready. He took the letters, held them for a long moment, and tucked them inside his coat. Does he know anything, he asked. Doña Marta sighed. He knows she died after childbirth. He knows she loved a man who never came back. But he doesn't know it was you. Tomas nodded. Then he knows just enough to hate the wrong man. Doña Marta stepped forward and put a hand on his good shoulder. Then tell him who the right man is. That evening, Tomas watched Iker again from the porch. The boy was brushing down one of the colts, the sun catching the edge of his face, and for the first time, Tomas didn't just see Yunwen. He saw himself. The stiffness in the spine, the way his jaw clenched when he thought no one was watching, the way his hand lingered on the animal's neck, firm but careful. Everything Yunwen had loved in him and everything he had run from. Tomorrow he would ask Iker to sit with him. Tomorrow he would begin. But Iker wasn't just a boy waiting for answers. He had been writing, searching, questioning. And soon the past would meet the present, not gently, but with fire. Because Iker was ready to uncover the truth too, on his own terms. The notebook was nearly full. Iker sat on the edge of his cot in the bunkhouse pen, gripped tightly, the pages in his lap covered in small, neat handwriting. Some lines were crossed out, others underlined. The last page had only a single line written over and over, he knew. He chose to stay away. He closed the book and held it in his hands. His fingers shook slightly, but his jaw remained tight. There was nothing left to write, only answers to demand. He tucked the notebook under his blanket and stepped outside. The air was thick with heat, still and heavy. The ranch was quiet, too quiet. Most of the other workers were out in the eastern pastures. He didn't want them around for what he was planning. At the small chapel, the same one his mother had taken him to when he was little, Padre Eusebio sat under the shade of a fig tree, reading from a worn leather Bible. The priest looked up as Iker approached. Didn't expect to see you today, Mijo Eusebio said, smiling faintly. You only come when something's weighing on you. Something's been weighing on me my whole life, Padre. Eusebio closed the book and sat up straighter. Then maybe it's time to speak it. Iker stood silent for a moment, then said, I want to know who my father was. The priest didn't flinch, but something in his eyes changed, an old grief or maybe guilt flickering like a flame behind tired lids. Why now? He asked gently. Because silence is poison, Iker said, his voice low, and I'm tired of swallowing it. Eusebio gestured to the stone bench beside him. Sit. Iker did. You've always been sharp, the priest said. Sharp like your mother. She had that same stare, like she could see through your skin and into your secrets. She had plenty of her own, Iker muttered. Eusebio gave a small nod. She kept them for you, not from you. Iker leaned forward, elbows on his knees. She told me he left. She said he promised he'd return, then never did. And she died because he didn't. The priest looked away. Do you know who he was? There was a long silence. Then Eusebio said carefully, some sins don't die in the confessional. They wait in flesh and blood. Iker turned to him sharply. So you do know. Eusebio folded his hands. She didn't tell me his name, but she told me what happened. He was young, ambitious, poor. Thought he needed to leave to prove something. She was already pregnant. She found out just after he left. She thought telling him would make him feel trapped. She didn't want that. Iker's hands curled into fists. She gave him an out. She gave you a chance to be born without bitterness. That worked out real well, Iker snapped. The priest didn't respond. I've spent 22 years trying to fill in the blanks. And every time I think I'm close, someone shuts the door. And if that door leads somewhere you're not ready for, I'm already there, Padre. Eusebio looked him over. You've been talking to someone, haven't you? Iker didn't answer. The priest exhaled. Let me ask you something, mijo. If you found out your father never knew, if it turns out he was never told what, then I don't believe that. But if Iker hesitated, then he still left. He still chose something else. People don't always choose the wrong thing because they're evil, the priest said. Sometimes they choose it because they're afraid, or too proud, or too young to see what matters. That's a poor excuse for a father. It's a poor excuse for a man. But people can become more than their worst choice. Iker stood. Doña Marta knows, doesn't she? Eusebio didn't speak. She's always looked at me like she's carrying something heavy. She loved your mother. Still does. Then she should have told me the truth. Maybe she thought she was protecting you. From what, a ghost? Eusebio sighed and rose to his feet. You don't just want a name, Iker. You want a reason. And I don't know if there's a reason good enough to fill what was left empty. Iker turned away. I'll find out, he said. With or without you. As he walked back toward the bunkhouse, the priest called after him, voice low but firm. Whatever truth you find, be ready. It may not heal you. Iker didn't look back. At the main house, Don Tomas was reading through the letters again. Yunwen's words had grown softer the more he read them, not because the ink had faded, but because the pain behind them had. She had never written in anger. Even in loneliness, even as her body failed her, she had written with hope. He had never deserved her. A knock at the door broke the moment. It was Anita. She looked nervous. There's something you should know, she said. He set the letters down. What is it? Iker went to see Padre Eusebio. Tomas's breath caught. Anita continued. He's asking questions. Tomas nodded slowly. It was bound to happen, he said. What did the Padre tell him? I don't know. But Iker came back different. Like something got sharper. Tomas stood. He walked to the window. Iker was walking across the field now, heading straight for the barn. His stride was full of purpose. "I don't know if I can reach him," Tomas said quietly. "Maybe you're not supposed to reach him," Anita said behind him. "Maybe you're just supposed to stand still long enough for him to see you." He turned to look at her. "You're wiser than your age suggests. I just pay attention." She turned to leave, but then paused. "Whatever happens, Iker deserves the truth." Tomas nodded. "He'll get it." That night, Iker sat on the steps of the bunkhouse staring at the stars. He didn't open the notebook this time. He didn't need to. The questions were already etched in his bones. Tomorrow he would ask Doña Marta. And if she didn't answer, he'd ask the man whose eyes wouldn't stop following him across the ranch. Because even if no one said it aloud, yet the truth was circling, and it was closing in fast. Iker's quiet begins to crack. His anger doesn't stay buried. And the more he watches Don Tomas, the more he starts to wonder. Is hatred enough to protect yourself from the truth, or is it just a slower kind of wound? The ranch had its own rhythm hooves against dirt wind in the cornstalks, whistles between cowhands. But that morning something in the air felt out of step. Don Tomas felt it as soon as he stepped outside. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, tense. He spotted Iker in the distance, raking hay in broad, deliberate strokes, muscles taut beneath the fabric of his shirt. The boy moved like he was trying not to explode. Tomas had seen that kind of fury before in soldiers, in men who'd buried more than they could carry, and in himself. He knew it was time. He'd waited long enough. Down by the barn, Anita watched Iker work. She didn't speak. She'd tried that before and gotten a cold nod in return. Today, she just watched. When Lucia came over with a bucket of feed, Anita murmured under her breath, "He's been like that all morning. Eyes burning holes in the dirt." Lucia set the bucket down. "Maybe he's just tired." "No," Anita said. "Something's different. He doesn't talk much, but his silence burns." Lucia looked toward Iker, then quickly looked away. "What do you think he's going to do?" "I don't know," Anita whispered. "But I don't think it'll stay quiet much longer." Inside the stables, the air was warm and musky. Iker pushed the rake into a pile of straw, then dropped it. His chest rose and fell fast. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist and stared at the wooden beam in front of him, like it owed him something. He pulled his notebook from his back pocket. It was bent at the corners now, pages dog-eared and weary. He flipped to the latest page. The name Tomas Orozco was circled 3 times. He hadn't written anything new since speaking with Padre Eusebio. Words didn't come easy anymore, not when every second spent writing felt like avoiding what needed to be said out loud. But what would he even say? "Why didn't you come back? Did you ever think of her again? Did you ever think of me?" He slammed the notebook shut. He couldn't carry those questions forever. Sooner or later, they'd turn into something uglier than silence. Footsteps. He turned. Don Tomas stood just inside the doorway, his eyes not challenging, but not soft either. Iker tucked the notebook back into his pocket. "We need to talk," Tomas said. "I'm working," Iker replied, turning back to the pile of straw. Tomas took another step inside. "I know you've been asking questions." Iker kept raking. "Seems like everybody knows everything around here." Tomas didn't move. "You have the right to ask." Iker dropped the rake, turned around. "Do I?" The words snapped like a whip. Tomas nodded. "Yes." Iker's eyes locked with his. There was no fear there, only fire. "Then tell me something real." Did you know her, my mother? Tomas exhaled. I did. Did you love her? I did. Then where the hell were you? It was the first time Iker raised his voice. It echoed off the stable walls like a shot. Tomas stepped closer. I didn't know. I left to make something of myself. I told her I'd be back. She told me to go. You didn't write. I did. Once, maybe twice, but I had no address, no reply. I thought. You thought she'd wait, Iker spat. No, I hoped she would. But I didn't expect her to. I wanted to give her something better. You gave her nothing. The words cut deep. Tomas nodded. You're right. Iker's chest heaved. She died alone, while you were building fences and buying cattle. Tomas looked down. I know that now. And what about me? Iker said, stepping closer. Did you know about me? No. Not until 2 days ago. That's convenient. Tomas didn't defend himself. It doesn't make it better. But it's the truth. They stood there only feet apart, breathing the same dusty air. Time felt thick between them. Tomas pulled something from inside his coat. A folded letter. She wrote this for you. Doña Marta kept it. I think you should read it. Iker stared at it like it was a snake. I'm not ready. That's fair, Tomas said. I want you to have it. When you are. Iker didn't take the letter, so Tomas set it gently on the edge of a hay bale. I didn't come here to fix things in one conversation, Tomas said. I came because you deserve to hear it from me, not from whispers. Iker turned away. Tomas waited. Then he walked out. Alone again, Iker stared at the letter for a long time. He didn't open it. Not yet. That night, Iker didn't sleep in the bunkhouse. He walked past it up the ridge behind the chapel, to the old shed no one used anymore. He lit a lantern and pulled out his notebook. He didn't write this time. He just stared at the letter. His hands trembled when he finally picked it up. He held it for minutes, maybe hours, before sliding it under the notebook and blowing out the lantern. The anger hadn't gone, but it had changed. It wasn't fire anymore. It was ash. The next morning, Tomas sat at the kitchen table staring into his coffee. Doña Marta stood by the sink wiping a plate that had long been dry. He spoke, Tomas said. I heard, she said. I don't think it helped. It will, she said. Just not right away. Tomas looked up. He said, I gave her nothing. And he's not wrong. Tomas nodded. But you're giving him something now, she added. Maybe too late. Doña Marta turned. Maybe not. If he reads that letter. By the stables, Anita spotted Iker walking toward the paddock, slower than usual, less tension in his shoulders. He passed her without a word, but she saw something in his face. Not peace, but maybe the start of it. But not all peace is quiet. As Tomas opens his heart, Iker begins to open the letter, and what he finds inside will change not only how he sees his mother, but what he plans to do next. Because the truth doesn't just answer questions. It creates new ones. The old shed creaked in the wind, like it was whispering secrets through the warped boards. Inside, the single oil lantern cast long, wavering shadows along the cracked floor and dust-covered walls. Iker sat cross-legged on the ground, the letter from his mother resting on his thigh like a weight he didn't know how to lift. His fingers hovered above the fold, then curled into fists. He had told himself he was ready. He had looked Don Tomas in the eyes and thrown every truth he had like daggers. And yet here he was, hesitating in the dark, afraid of a voice that only lived on paper. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Iker drew in a breath and broke the seal. Her handwriting was just as he remembered, small, gentle, like she never wanted to take up too much space. Mi querido Iker, if you are reading this, it means life gave you a chance. I never had the chance to ask questions. And I pray this gives you some answers. He stopped after the first line. Swallowed hard. She wrote about the day she found out she was pregnant. About how scared she was, not of raising him, but of telling the man she loved. She feared he would stay out of duty, not love, and she couldn't bear to see that look in his eyes. I loved your father, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. But he was young, and so was I. He had dreams that stretched farther than these mountains. I wanted him to chase them. So I let him go. Iker clenched his jaw, the words blurring. The letter didn't sound like anger or regret. It sounded like hope wrapped in sorrow. He doesn't know about you. He never did. That was my choice. If he had known, I think he would have come back. But by the time I realized that it was already too late. He folded the letter back into its envelope with trembling hands and stared into the lantern's flickering glow. I wasn't born with hatred, he said out loud, voice cracking, but someone handed it to me. He stood slowly, legs stiff. The anger hadn't left. It just had a new shape now, smaller, sharper. He picked up his notebook and added one line beneath his last entry. She chose silence. He didn't even get a choice. The next morning, Tomas was at the paddock, tightening the latch on a gate when he saw Iker approaching. His heart kicked up. The boy walked with his hands in his pockets, shoulders stiff, face unreadable. Tomas waited. I read it, Iker said flatly. Tomas nodded once. And she protected you. Tomas frowned. That's not how I would have said it. Iker's eyes narrowed. You think she should have told you? I think she should have told both of us. I lost 22 years of your life, and you lost more than that. There was silence. Not sharp this time. Heavy. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, Iker said. You're not supposed to feel anything specific, Tomas replied. Just honest. Iker looked away toward the hills that edged the ranch. Everything I've known about myself, about her, it feels fragile now. She was strong, Tomas said softly. Stronger than I deserved. Iker nodded, jaw tight. She made it easier for me to hate you. Now she's made it harder. Tomas exhaled. Good. Hate is easy. Understanding isn't. They stood side by side, watching two horses circle in the corral. She wrote that you would have come back, Iker said quietly. Tomas looked down. I would have, without hesitation. But you didn't write her. I did. But once or twice. When I got no reply, I thought, you gave up. I gave in to what I believed. That she'd moved on, that she was better off. Iker was quiet. I wish I could blame you more. I've spent years doing it. And now, I'm not sure I know how. Tomas didn't try to offer comfort. It'll come and go, trust me. Iker looked at him then. Really looked. What do I do now? You don't owe me anything, Tomas said. But if you want to talk more, I'll be here. Iker's expression was unreadable. He turned and walked away. But this time he didn't slam the door behind him. That night, Iker returned to the shed. But not to sit. Not to write. He opened a small wooden chest in the corner, his private collection of keepsakes, a stone carved by his mother when he was a boy, an old scarf she'd worn in the winter, and a worn page torn from a religious book she'd read aloud before bed. He added the letter to it, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he needed to keep it close. Then he pulled out the list, the one he had started weeks ago. A list of questions, names, possibilities. He crossed off a name, Tomás Orozco. Not because the story was finished, but because the truth was no longer a question. He had a father. Now he needed to decide what that meant. Across the ranch, Don Tomás sat on the porch with Doña Marta beside him. Neither spoke for a long while. "He's quiet," Tomás said finally. "That boy always had more fire in silence than others have in shouting," Marta replied. Tomás nodded. "He said something today that stuck. What he wasn't born with hatred, but someone handed it to him." Doña Marta sighed. "Sometimes silence does that. He's not pushing me away, but he's not letting me in either." "He will," she said, "eventually." Tomás looked out at the stars. "I'm not sure I deserve that." "No one does. That's not how family works." The next morning, Tomás woke early and saddled 2 horses. He had no plan, only a need. He found Iker near the workshop fixing a fence post. "I'm heading to the northern fields," Tomás said. "Long ride. Could use a second pair of eyes." Iker paused. "You asking or ordering asking?" Iker didn't smile, but he set down the hammer and wiped his hands. "All right." Their first ride together begins. Not as father and son, but as 2 men caught between what was and what might be. But when Iker confesses something unexpected, his own search for identity, their fragile bond is tested, and the weight of unspoken truths will finally demand a reckoning. The northern edge of Rancho del Silencio stretched wide and wild, where the land turned from open pasture into scraggly hills and mesquite groves. It was quiet out there, too quiet for some, but perfect for 2 men trying to say things they didn't have words for. Don Tomás rode ahead, boots light and the stirrups reins loose in his hand. Iker followed a few yards behind, on a younger horse watching every move his father made without realizing it. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the main house. The morning air had been crisp. Now it was warming up, the kind of heat that peeled back layers without asking permission. Tomás finally slowed his horse near a fallen fence post. "We'll fix this one today," he said. "Been leaning too long." Iker dismounted without a word. They worked side by side, hands wrapped in rough gloves, sweat running down their temples. The hammering of nails filled the silence. Tomás wiped his brow and looked over at Iker. "You ever think about leaving here?" he asked. Iker didn't stop hammering. "Every day." Tomás gave a small, humorless chuckle. "That's honest." Iker set the hammer down. "Doesn't mean I will. Just means I think about it." "Where would you go far? Maybe the city. Maybe nowhere. Just somewhere that doesn't feel like it remembers things I wasn't around for." Tomás's face tightened. "This place has a long memory." Iker nodded. "That's the problem." They sat on the edge of a fence rail, the wood creaking beneath their weight. A buzzard circled far overhead. Cicadas hummed louder now, like they'd been waiting for the right kind of quiet. Iker leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. "When I was a kid," he said, "I used to imagine what my father might look like. I'd draw faces in the dirt with a stick. Gave him a mustache once. Big hands. Then later I stopped drawing. Why? Because the more I tried to picture him, the angrier I got." Tomás watched him, not moving. "I thought maybe I hated him," Iker continued. "And then I thought maybe I hated myself for caring who he was." He looked over, eyes hard. I don't hate you because I know you, I hate you because you remind me of what I never had. Tomas didn't flinch. He just breathed in deep and let the words settle in his chest. That's fair. Iker shook his head. It's not about fairness. It's just what it is. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the faint smell of dry grass. Tomas stood and walked a few steps away, then turned back. You remind me of her. Iker blinked. Who, your mother? Yunwen. Tomas's voice was low, unsteady. You have her eyes, her way of holding everything inside until it breaks. Her fire. I didn't get much else from her, Iker said quietly. You got the best of her. There was silence again, but it was different this time. Less jagged. Iker stood too. I've been keeping a notebook since before all this. Tomas nodded. I figured. It started as a way to track questions, people, things I overheard. Then it turned into something else. Like what, Ike? Like a map of who I thought I was supposed to be. He reached into his satchel and pulled it out, handing it over. Tomas took it gently. The cover was frayed, the corners softened by time and use. Do you want me to read it? He asked. Eventually. But I want you to understand something first. Tomas met his eyes. I was never looking for you, Iker said. Not on purpose. I was trying to prove something to myself, that I didn't need anyone, that I could carry all this alone. And now I'm not sure. Maybe I don't want to carry it alone anymore. Tomas swallowed hard. I'm not asking to be your father, he said. Not in the way I should have been. That time's gone. I know. But I'd like to be here, however you'll have me. Iker nodded once. I'm not ready to call you anything. Not yet. Tomas managed a faint smile. Then we'll just be two men fixing fences. Iker took the notebook back and tucked it away. Good, he said. Because there's more to fix. Later that evening, they returned to the ranch. The light had turned gold, soaking the fields in that end-of-day quiet that always came before dinner and prayers. Doña Marta met them at the stable with a cloth in her hands and eyes sharp with observation. You two look like you've been through a storm. Tomas grunted. Just weather. Iker didn't speak. But as he walked past her, he gave a small nod, a signal that something had changed. Something was shifting. She watched him walk away and then looked back at Tomas. You told him enough. She handed him a damp towel. He needs more than tools and tasks. He needs truth. Tomas wiped the sweat from his face. He'll get it. When he's ready. Doña Marta looked unconvinced but didn't press. That night, Iker returned to the shed, not to hide, not to write, but to sit in the quiet and feel what it meant to not be alone with it anymore. He opened the notebook and added one more line beneath his last entry. He didn't give me what I wanted, but maybe he's giving me something I never expected. He left the notebook open this time, like he wanted the words to breathe. He looked up through the hole in the shed roof where the stars peeked through. Something inside him softened. Not healed, not fixed, but softened. But every moment of softening comes with a test. The next day, Tomas makes a mistake. He offers Iker something too soon, something too big. And Iker, still walking the line between resentment and reconciliation, will have to choose. Does he take the hand that once left him behind or pull away before it can let go again? The sun hadn't yet climbed over the hills when Don Tomas entered the kitchen. He moved quieter than usual, like he didn't want to wake the ghosts hanging in the corners of the old house. Coffee steamed in his mug untouched as he stared at a folded document on the table, thick parchment signed and sealed the day before. The deed transfer. He'd had the lawyer draft it fast, half the land earmarked for Iker. Nothing formal yet, nothing binding. Just a gesture, a starting point. But even gestures had weight. Doña Marta entered, wiping her hands on a dish towel, stopping when she saw the paper. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," Tomas said. "But I'm doing it anyway." She studied him. He's still raw. "I know. You give someone the world before they've decided they want a place in it," she said gently. "You might just scare them off." Tomas stared at the paper. "I'm not giving him the world. Just a piece of it. A piece that should have been his all along." Out by the barn, Iker saddled a mule for the delivery trip to the neighboring farm. The air smelled of dust and ripe persimmons, and the early heat pressed down before it had any right to. Anita approached with a tin of water and handed it over without a word. "Thanks," Iker said. She lingered. "You sleep okay?" she asked. Iker nodded. "Yeah. You and the old man. Seemed better yesterday. We talked. That's a start." She turned to leave but paused. "You know," she said over her shoulder, "he's not great at small steps. Only knows how to give in big, dumb ones." Iker frowned, confused, but before he could ask, Tomas called from the porch. "Iker, come inside a moment." The boy hesitated, then followed. Inside, the kitchen was lit only by the open shutters. Tomas stood by the table, hands resting on the folded document. He looked older than usual. Not tired, just worn, like a man holding something fragile. "I want to show you something," he said. Iker walked closer, eyeing the paper. Tomas unfolded it, slid it across the table. Iker read the top line. "Preliminary transfer of property. Rancho del Silencio." His stomach tightened. Tomas cleared his throat. "It's not official. Yet. But it's an offer. A share. Not out of guilt. Not to fix the past. Just something real. Something that says I'm here. And I see you." Iker didn't touch the paper. "You're giving me land. I'm offering it." Iker's jaw tightened. Why, Tomas stepped back. "Because you're my son, because this place could be yours too if you want it." Iker shook his head slowly. "You think this makes up for 22 years? No. I don't think anything can." "Then why now? Because it's yours whether you take it or not. I just wanted you to know that." Iker stared at him, then at the paper, then back again. "You think a piece of paper changes everything?" "No," Tomas said. "But maybe it's a place to start." Iker backed away. "I'm not ready for this." Tomas nodded. "Okay. I mean it. This is too much." "I get it. You say you're not trying to fix things, but this feels like a fix, like buying your way out." Tomas looked hurt but not surprised. "That's not what this is." "But it feels like it," Iker said. They stood there, the silence swelling between them again, this time sharper, more brittle. "I need to breathe," Iker muttered, and left before Tomas could say anything else. Out by the creek, Iker threw a stone hard into the water, then another, then another. His thoughts raced. Why did everything good have to come with pressure? It wasn't that he didn't want a place here. He just wasn't sure if he wanted this place, or this life, or the man who came with it. He sat on a flat rock, hands buried in his hair, breathing hard. "You okay?" Anita stood a few feet away, arms crossed. "I don't know," he said. "He offered you the land." Iker nodded. She walked closer and sat beside him. "You mad because he offered, or because you don't know if you can say yes?" He looked at her. "I don't know what saying yes even means," he said. "Does it mean I forgive him, that I become him, that I forget everything I didn't have?" "No," she said. "It just means you take a step. Doesn't have to be forever. Just one step." Iker exhaled. "Feels like a trap." "It's not." "How do you know?" "Because I know what a trap looks like," she said. "And this isn't one. This is a man holding something out with a shaking hand." He was quiet for a long time. "Doña Marta told me something once," Anita added. She said, "Some men only learn how to love once they realize how much they've wasted not doing it." Iker laughed under his breath. "That sounds like her." Anita nudged him. "You don't have to decide today." He nodded, but he didn't move. That night, Tomas sat on the porch, the unsigned deed on the table beside him. The bottle of mezcal was half full, the glass untouched. Iker hadn't come back to the main house for supper. Doña Marta stepped out, sat beside him. "Give him time," she said. "I offered too much. You offered honesty." Tomas rubbed his eyes. "I should have started smaller. A fence. A conversation. A damn apology." She patted his hand. "You're learning. That's something. Feels like losing. Feels like being a father," she said softly. Iker returned to the shed, but didn't go inside. He stood at the doorway, staring at the stars through the broken roof. The notebook was still there on the bench. He picked it up, opened to the last page, and for the first time didn't write anything. He just stared at the blank space and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth building from nothing. But just when Iker begins to think he might say yes, news arrives that shifts everything. A man from the past. A name Iker had written in his notebook long ago. Not Tomas. A different man. One who might claim to be his real father. The storm didn't come from the sky. It rolled in on 4 tires and a cloud of desert dust just as the sun reached its highest point. The old Ford truck coughed smoke as it pulled up near the barn. The driver stepped out tall and rangy, with the look of someone who'd worn too many regrets and drank most of them down. His boots hit the ground like punctuation. Anita was first to notice. She squinted at the figure walking toward the house, a leather bag slung over one shoulder. Something in his gait felt off, too familiar to be a stranger, too foreign to belong. Doña Marta stepped out of the kitchen with a bowl of tomatoes. She froze mid-step. Her eyes narrowed. "Mierda," she whispered. Tomas came out next, wiping his hands on a rag. When he saw the man, he stopped cold. "Emilio." The man smiled with half his mouth. "Still got that hawk eye, Tomas." Tomas didn't smile back. "Why are you here?" Emilio dropped the bag with a soft thud. "Heard you've been playing house with someone who might be mine." The words hit like a hammer to the ribs. From behind the stable, Iker stepped into view, the last to understand, until he saw the stranger's face. The lines, the jaw, the fire in the eyes. It was like looking at a cracked version of his own reflection. Iker, Emilio said, voice rough as gravel. "Name still fits, huh?" Iker looked between the two men. "Who are you?" Emilio chuckled. "Hell. Guess your mother didn't tell you either." Doña Marta stepped forward. "You need to leave." I just got here, Emilio said. And I ain't looking for trouble. I'm looking for answers. Tomas stepped between him and Iker. You've had 22 years to come back. Emilio raised a brow. So did you. Silence. Then Iker said, somebody tell me what the hell is going on. Tomas turned, voice tight. This is Emilio Vargas. He worked on the ranch with me. Years ago, worked close with your mama too, Emilio added. Iker stared at him, face blank. Emilio smiled. We were together, before she fell for Cowboy of the Year over here. Tomas bristled. She never mentioned you, Iker said. She wouldn't, Emilio said, almost tender. I left. Quick, too quick. Got scared. He turned to Tomas. And by the time I thought I might come back, you were already putting flowers on her grave. Tomas clenched his fists. I didn't come to fight, Emilio said. I came because I saw a photo, in town. Boy with my jaw, my mother's eyes, and a birth date that matches. He looked back to Iker. I came because I might be your father. Anita gasped behind them. Iker looked like the ground had vanished beneath him. No, Tomas said flatly. You don't get to come here and drop that like it's nothing. I'm not saying I know, Emilio said. I'm saying I want to. Iker's voice was low. Why now? Emilio looked at him, and for a moment the bravado dropped. Because I'm sick. Liver. Docs say I got a year, maybe less. I got a right to know if I left something good in this world. Iker took a step back. I don't even know you. And I don't know you, Emilio said. That's why I'm here. Tomas stepped forward again. You can't just show up and throw a wrench in this. Emilio held up a hand. You had your chance, Joe. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. Doña Marta stepped in, voice sharp. Enough, all of you. They fell silent. She turned to Iker. This is your choice, no one else's. Iker looked at them, Tomas silent and tense. Emilio eyes filled with a desperate fire. Anita hovering near the doorway, unsure whether to stay or run. And then he said, a name is just a door, what matters is who walks through it. Then he turned and walked away. Iker didn't stop until he reached the ridge behind the chapel. The wind up there cut through his shirt like ice. He sat on a rock and tried to steady his hands. His notebook was in his satchel, but he didn't take it out. Words felt useless. How could two men both claim the same space in his history? He had only just begun to warm to the idea of belonging, of having something here, something real. Now this, another door, another maybe. Was this fate or just more of life's cruel timing behind him, footsteps? He turned. Tomas stood at the top of the ridge. He's lying, Tomas said. Or maybe not. I don't know. But the timing. I don't care about timing, Iker said. Tomas took a breath. What do you care about? I don't know yet, Iker said honestly. I just know I spent years wishing for one truth. Now I've got three. Iker, I'm not mad, Iker said. Not at you, not at him, I'm just tired of being pulled between people who had their chances. Tomas nodded slowly. What do you want to do? Iker looked at the sky. I want to take a test. Blood. DNA. Just to know. Tomas blinked. All right. I'm not saying he's my father. I'm not saying he's not. I'm saying I need to know what's real before I decide where to put my feet. Tomas stepped back. Whatever you need, I'll support it. Iker nodded. But I'm not choosing today, he added, and neither of you gets to force it. Back at the house, Emilio sat on the porch, sipping water, staring out at the horizon, like it owed him something. Anita brought him a plate of food. He looked up, surprised. I don't know if you're lying or not, she said, but he doesn't need more men telling him who he belongs to. I ain't telling, Emilio replied. I'm asking. She set the plate down. Just don't break him, she said, and walked off. Emilio looked down at the food. He didn't touch it. As the DNA test is arranged, emotions stir across the ranch. Lines are drawn, truths reconsidered. But while the men prepare for results, another revelation emerges, something from Yunuen's past that no one expected. Something that could change everything again. A soft, steady rainfall that wrapped the ranch in hush, soaking the dust. The heat, and maybe even the tension that had built like storm clouds inside the house. Iker lay awake in the shed, staring at the rafters as droplets tapped a rhythm above. His shirt clung to his skin, damp with sweat, or nerves, maybe both. The DNA test had been sent off that morning, blood from him and Emilio drawn with quiet urgency by a traveling nurse who didn't ask questions. Now came the wait. But answers weren't the only thing circling overhead. By morning, a letter had arrived, not addressed to Iker or Tomas, but to Doña Marta. She found it folded neatly in a book Yunuen once kept tucked inside a hollowed-out section between the pages of Cien Años de Soledad. The handwriting was unmistakable, delicate, slanted, full of care. It was from Yunuen. And it was dated just 1 week before she died. Marta sat at the kitchen table for a long time before she brought it out. Tomas, Iker, and even Emilio, who hadn't yet left, sat together, not quite facing each other, more like strangers on a train forced into the same cabin. I wasn't going to show this, Marta said quietly, until the test came back. But this changes everything. She slid the letter onto the table. Iker reached for it first. Tomas put a hand on his shoulder. Let him. Iker opened it slowly, as if the paper might crumble from being handled too late. Mi querida Marta, if something happens, if my heart fails before I can tell him I need someone to know. Not for pity, not for justice, just truth. I lied. Years ago, I told Emilio he might be the father. I did it because I was angry, alone, and afraid Tomas had forgotten me. But the dates, the days I marked on my calendar, they don't lie. The child is Tomas's. I never told Emilio the truth because by the time he came back, it would have undone too much. I let him believe a version of the story that hurt less. That made him feel less like the one who abandoned us both. But the truth doesn't end a story, it complicates it. Tell Iker when the time is right. Iker's hands shook. He read it again and again, then folded it neatly, set it down, and stood up from the table. Neither Tomas nor Emilio spoke. Outside, the sky was beginning to clear, the rain, now a distant memory. Iker stepped out into the yard and let the cold air bite his skin. Anita followed a few steps behind, barefoot on the wet earth. Well, she asked. She knew, Iker said. All along. And now you do. He nodded. I thought knowing would make it easier, he said. It never does. They stood in silence until he finally said, He's not my father. Emilio. Do you believe it because of the letter? No, Iker said. I believe it because when I looked at him, I saw a man who wanted to be part of something, not someone who ever was. And Tomas Iker exhaled. He was always part of it, even when he wasn't there. Back inside, Emilio poured himself a drink, strong, cheap whiskey that burned like betrayal. He didn't speak when Iker re-entered. Didn't even look at him. "I'm sorry," Iker said. Emilio raised a brow. For what, he asked. For the truth. Emilio laughed bitterly. "Hell, kid. I came here to find something that might make me whole. Instead, I found the piece never fit." "You still mattered," Iker said. "Don't lie. I'm not. You reminded me what could have been worse. What could have hurt more." Emilio looked at him now. "You're too wise for 22. Iker gave a half smile. "Been old since I was 10. Emilio took another sip. "I'll be gone by morning. You don't have to leave like that." "I do. Because if I stay, I'll keep pretending." Iker nodded. "Then thank you. For trying." They didn't shake hands. They just looked at each other like two men who shared a page that didn't make the final book. That night, Tomas sat on the porch alone again. Iker came out after supper, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He handed one to Tomas and sat beside him. "Long day," Tomas muttered. "Long life," Iker said. They sat in quiet for a moment before Iker added, "She knew all along." Tomas nodded. "That letter broke me. And fixed me. Me too." Tomas looked over. "You believe it, I do." Tomas swallowed hard. "Then you know why I never deserved forgiveness." "Maybe not," Iker said. "But you tried anyway. That count for something, it does." Tomas leaned back. "You still thinking about leaving?" "I was," Iker said. "But now I'm thinking about staying. A beat. But on my terms." Tomas nodded. "Whatever those are, we'll find them together." Iker looked toward the horizon. "I don't know what it looks like yet," he said. "But I know it's not alone." They sipped their coffee as the last bit of twilight faded. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. In her room, Doña Marta lit a candle and reread the letter once more. Her lips moved as she whispered the last line. "The truth doesn't end a story, it complicates it." She folded the paper, slid it back into the hollowed-out book, and placed it back on the shelf. Not hidden. Just home. But peace, like rain, doesn't last forever. When a stranger from Yunwen's youth arrives with a message and a request, one she made before her death, Iker is faced with a promise he never knew he needed to keep. And what he chooses next may define the legacy he carries forward. The stranger rode in from the south just past noon. He came slowly without haste atop a chestnut mare coated in trail dust and old scars. His coat was frayed hat low over his brow, and though he looked young at a distance, the lines on his face said otherwise. He had the kind of eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised, and a silence that followed him like a shadow. Iker spotted him first. He'd been working by the orchard fence, restringing wire with Anita, when he noticed the rider crossing the pasture. Something about the man's posture struck him deliberate, but not aggressive. Like someone who carried news, not trouble. "Another one," Anita muttered. "What is it with this ranch and men from the past showing up uninvited?" Iker wiped sweat from his brow, lips tight. "Let's find out." By the time they reached the front porch, the stranger had already dismounted and tied his mare to the hitch. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets, posture relaxed but alert, as if unsure whether to knock or walk away. Tomas stepped outside, eyeing him with the caution of a man who's had enough surprises. "Can we help you?" he asked. The man nodded once. "Looking for Iker." "I'm Iker," he said, stepping forward. The man looked him up and down, then reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. Name's Mateo. I knew your mother. Tomas stiffened. Anita glanced at Iker, but the young man kept his eyes on the stranger. Mateo offered the letter. She gave me this, years ago. Said to deliver it only if I found you, and only if you'd already learned who your father was. Iker took the envelope, brow furrowed. The paper was yellowed slightly with time sealed in wax. She said you might need it someday, Mateo added. What's in it, I don't know. She wouldn't say. Tomas took a step closer. Where'd you know her from? Mateo didn't flinch. We worked together at the mission east of Loma Roja. She helped the children there. I was part of the church staff. Iker turned the letter in his hands. His fingers trembled slightly, but not from fear, from weight. Why now? He asked. Because I only just heard she passed. And when I did, I asked around. Found this ranch. Found your name. Iker nodded. Thank you. Mateo tipped his hat. If you want more stories about her, I've got a few. But only if you ask. Then he mounted and rode off without waiting for an answer. Back in the house, Iker sat at the kitchen table with the letter unopened. Doña Marta, Tomas, and Anita hovered nearby, pretending to busy themselves. You can read it alone, Tomas said softly. No, Iker said. She wanted me to know something. If I have it, I want to share it. He cracked the wax seal. The letter was short. Me, Iker, if this finds you, I know you've already walked through more fire than I ever wanted for you. I pray you have also found some light. There is a girl. Her name is Solana. She is not your sister by blood, but by soul. I helped deliver her in a village that had no clean water, no medicine. Her mother died in childbirth. Her father was already gone. I kept her secret for years, hid her in the mission, raised her with the other children. But she was always different. Quiet, fierce, alone. I had no means to keep her forever. So I entrusted her to the nuns, left money, and asked only one thing, that they tell her when the time came about me. And now I ask you, if life ever leads you her way, don't pass her by. Some debts aren't paid with money, they're paid by showing up when no one else will. Iker read the letter 3 times before speaking. She had another child. Not hers, Tomas said, but she loved her like one. Anita stepped closer. What now? I don't know, Iker said. But I have to find her. Even if she doesn't want to be found, Tomas asked. I won't force anything, Iker said. But I won't ignore her either. Marta touched his shoulder. Your mother asked this of you, that matters. Yeah, Iker whispered. It does. The next morning, Iker loaded a satchel with supplies maps, a copy of the letter Cash Water, and a small pocket knife his mother had given him years ago. He saddled one of the faster horses and said his goodbyes quietly. Tomas met him at the edge of the pasture. You know where to start? He asked. Loma Roja, the mission Mateo mentioned. Tomas nodded. Take Anita with you. She's good with strangers. Iker hesitated. She doesn't owe me that. Tomas smiled. She's not doing it for you. She's doing it for your mother. Anita rode up behind them, hat pulled low, bandana around her neck. I heard someone say there'd be travel, she said. Didn't want to miss the dust. Iker smirked. You sure about this? Nope. But I'm going anyway. They rode out by mid-morning, dust rising behind them, like smoke from a slow fire. That night, they camped near the dry riverbed, past Arroyo Seco. Iker sat staring at the flames while Anita boiled coffee. She really kept a lot from you, she said finally. I used to be angry about that. and now I think she gave me just enough, at the right time. Anita passed him the tin mug. You scared to meet Solana? I'm scared she'll be angry, that she'll think I came to take something. You're not taking. You're answering. He nodded. Anita sipped her coffee. She might not want a brother. Then I'll settle for being a shadow. She looked at him. You're more than a shadow, Iker. He didn't reply, but his silence said he heard her. Back at Rancho del Silencio, Tomas sat alone in Iker's shed holding the notebook the boy had left behind. He flipped through the pages, questions, drawings, pieces of memory stitched together with ink and grief. On one page near the back, Iker had written, "Legacy isn't blood. It's who shows up when it matters." Tomas closed the book and set it gently on the bench. As Iker and Anita arrive at the mission, truths wait beneath old stone walls and whispered prayers. But Solana isn't what they expect, and Iker will have to face the hardest choice of all, whether to offer connection or respect distance. Because sometimes love means staying, and sometimes it means letting someone walk away. They arrived in Loma Roja just after sunrise. The town was smaller than Iker imagined, one dirt road, a shuttered general store, and the mission at the edge of it all. The bell tower rose modestly against the pale orange sky, paint peeling its cross, casting a crooked shadow over the courtyard below. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere beyond the wall. Iker sat motionless on his horse, staring at the mission as if time might rewind if he blinked too slowly. Anita glanced at him. You ready? I don't think I'll ever be ready, he said. But I'm here. They dismounted and tied their horses to the gate. A nun greeted them near the chapel steps. Her eyes were warm if tired, and she walked with the gait of someone used to silence not visitors. You must be Iker, she said. I am. And this is Anita, she replied. Friend. The nun nodded. Follow me. She led them past flower beds and cracked stone paths down a narrow corridor with arched windows that looked out on the hills. It smelled of wax soap and dust baked into the walls. She's in the library, the nun said. She helps the younger children with reading. Iker's breath caught. She knows we're coming. The nun shook her head. We never told her about you, but your mother asked that we show her the letter if you ever did. They stopped at a door lined with shelves of worn books. The nun opened it gently. A young woman sat cross-legged on a rug reading aloud to 3 small boys. Her voice was low, rhythmic, patient. She looked about 20. Skin, sun-kissed hair, dark and thick in a loose braid, posture alert. Something about her reminded Iker of the hills after rain, quiet strength, blooming things just beneath the surface. The nun stepped in and whispered something. The girl Solana looked up. Her eyes landed on Iker, and time cracked open. They sat alone in the courtyard while the sun climbed higher. She held the letter in her lap, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. I always knew there was more, she said, but I never thought it would come to me. I didn't know you existed until a few days ago, Iker replied. Solana nodded. That's how most things go around here. You find out late or not at all. He offered a half smile. I think our mother wanted to protect you. She did. I felt it, even when I didn't have words for it. They were quiet for a moment. Why'd you come? She asked. I'm not sure, he said honestly. At first it was duty, but then I thought, maybe it's something more. Not to fix anything, just to offer a hand in case you ever wanted to take it. She studied him. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. She laughed. It was soft but real. I don't need saving, she said. I know. I don't need a brother. I know that too. He looked out across the courtyard. But I needed to say your name out loud. Needed to know you were real. That she loved you as much as I thought she might. Solana looked down. She used to sing to me. In the back room. Said I was a quiet fire. She called me her stubborn storm. They both smiled. Then Solana stood. I'm not ready to leave here, she said. I'm not asking you to, but I might want to know more. Later. I'll be there. She stepped closer and hugged him. It wasn't long. It wasn't loud. But it carried something sacred. Iker and Anita left before dusk. The horses moved slowly under the weight of reflection. The sky blushed pink behind them as the hills rolled out like old memories. Halfway back to Rancho del Silencio, they stopped to make camp. Anita built a fire. Iker sat beside it, notebook open pen in hand. What are you writing? She asked. A name. She leaned closer. He showed her. He'd written 2 names, Yunuen and Solana. Beneath them, a simple line. Not all family is found. Some is chosen. Some is promised. And some waits until you're brave enough to see it. Anita looked at him. You going to stay? She asked. I think so. You think I've spent years running from places. Now I want to build one. She smiled but didn't press further. Instead, she added a stick to the fire and said, Then let's start with breakfast. Tomorrow. You cook, deal, Iker said, grinning. They sat in silence as the stars appeared overhead one by one like memories returning home. Days later, back on the ranch, Tomas was waiting at the gate when Iker rode in. He didn't ask questions, just held out a hand. Iker took it, and that was enough. Doña Marta made tamales that night. They ate on the porch as fireflies danced in the distance. Laughter, hesitant but warm, rose into the air, like smoke from the past. Iker walked the perimeter before bed, checking the fences the way Tomas used to. He stopped by the orchard where his mother used to sit, and he whispered her name to the trees. The next morning he picked up a hammer, started rebuilding the old chicken coop with new wood. Not to erase the past, but to make space for whatever came next. Because healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like showing up. Sometimes it's holding someone's name in your mouth until it feels like a blessing. And sometimes it's just this: a man once broken standing on land that's no longer borrowed. Choosing to stay, choosing to build, choosing to love without condition.